Hello coders. So today I want to talk about a challenge that I face regularly, and this is when I'm working on my own, right? So I'm not working for a client, and this is about discipline, self-discipline when it comes to creating tasks and working on tasks and not over abstracting, not over complicating. It's a challenge to set those boundaries out. I want to give you an example. So we've been working heavily recently on the podcast side of howtocodewell.net. We have something in the region of 206 podcast episodes. What I have been striving to do is publishing those podcasts on howtocodewell.net/podcast, right? That's what I'm been pushing to do, and we've currently got about 150 up there. So we have been doing a lot of data entry, and one of the challenges that we were facing when we were doing this data entry was the duration. So every podcast has a duration. So how many hours, how many minutes, how many seconds is this podcast episode? Also, we have that for courses and tutorials. So the courses have the sum duration of all the tutorials within that course. The tutorials obviously have the duration of that particular tutorial, much like the podcast episode. But we were focusing on uploading the podcasts. So this brought in a bit of risk in terms of human error, because the duration is stored in the back end as seconds, right? But it is displayed on the front end as hours, minutes, and seconds. So I was trying to think of a way that I could create like an input widget, if you will, as to how to input both formats, hours, minutes, and seconds, 00:00:00, or an integer, which would be seconds, and then that would be translated to that string format. And it would do that calculation. It would work out. So if I've inputted the amount of seconds, then it would work out hours, minutes, and seconds. If I was to put in hours, minutes, and seconds, it would work out the seconds. And for both formats, it would store the seconds in the back end. That was the challenge. But the issue that I sometimes have as a developer, and I wonder if anybody can relate to this, is especially when I'm working on my own project, it becomes very tempting to do other things that initially seem quite related to the task at hand. But actually, the further you go down the rabbit hole, the less connected they are. So I wanted to talk about some temptations. So the first temptation is the way in which the JavaScript is stored on the site. We use Webpack on Core, which is fine, perfectly fine, but I would like to change that to be the asset mapper, and I would like to replace Webpack on Core with asset mapper. And you might be thinking, well, that's got nothing to do with durations, and you'll be perfectly correct, but it would be my off-ramp or my on-ramp to doing that task. The other one is trying to build some form of JavaScript validation layer, because we don't actually have that on the howtocodewell.net in the content management system, at least. It would be nice to have some form of layer that goes in between the HTML and the PHP that does the validation in a very uniform and universal manner, right? We have validation of JavaScript validation on certain widgets at certain places, but it would be nice to have something that is universal that I can just hook into, right? And again, that would be a good on-ramp to build that layer, right? An excuse, if you will. The other temptation is around how to actually implement this. So I've always wanted to just use raw JavaScript rather than any kind of framework or anything like this. But I wanted some reason I wanted to use object-oriented JavaScript. I haven't really done that much, and so I saw this as an opportunity to perhaps do that. So these are the wild temptations that I have when I create tasks for myself for projects that I'm working on. When I'm working with clients, it's different. Usually those tasks are either defined for me, or because there is such a time constraint, an accountability there. When you're working for clients that pay you money, you obviously only work on the one thing, right? And you try and get that done as best as you possibly can, and you are very blinkered to the other temptations and boundaries, you know, because they're not paying you for doing anything else, and B, it's not part of the technical specification. So how are you going to justify the fact that you've been working on something completely different when you should be working on this thing, right? So my mindset changes when I'm working for someone else rather than when I'm working for myself. When I'm working for myself, it's very easy to get into this frame of mind where I'm actually learning. I'm trying things out. I'm trying things new. Let's talk about some of the justifications that I give myself. So the justification for replacing the Webpack on Core with Asset Mapper is for career. It's a career advancing move, because some of the clients that I've had before, I have upgraded PHP, I've upgraded Symfony, I've upgraded JavaScript frameworks for, and so any opportunity to learn how to replace one package with another package, one way of doing things with another way of doing things, how to upgrade X to Y, is an opportunity for me to put on the CV. Yes, I've replaced Webpack on Core with Asset Mapper. So for me, that was quite an enticing, tempting challenge. And I suppose the main challenge of the duration input was firing off possible other challenges, side quests, if you will. The tempting thing about the JavaScript OOP, again, is to broaden my knowledge of JavaScript and see if I can actually do this in an OOP way, and see if I can work out the various different visibility scopes and whatnot. Then there was the challenge of putting this on other parts of the site, right? So you've got the courses and you've got the tutorials, as I mentioned earlier. Wouldn't it be nice to create something that was so generic, so universal, that I could just apply this widget to anywhere? Okay, but we were working on the podcast stuff, and that was high priority. It is high priority right now. We've been doing something like we've done 150 episodes. We've published those to the site. We've got probably another 60, 70 to put on. So the longer it would take me to actually build this input widget, the longer it would take me to deploy this, the more chance there would be of human error doing these calculations manually. So there was a time constraint that I needed to do. And again, you have this with clients, right? There's when you estimate how much time it's going to take to do this one thing, you're not interested in any tempting other thing that could prevent you from doing that. But when it's very different from when you're working with you on your own. So yeah, it's a challenge. I wonder if anybody else has this issue with, I guess it's self-discipline, setting yourself boundaries. One thing that has helped me is reviewing the task, the task title, as well as the description of the title. I use Jira, even if I'm working for my own stuff, right? I use Jira, and it's being specific. It's being like, it's saying, I want to create this widget that goes in this place, right? And I want this output, and it's going to be validated in this way. Being very specific, being very tightly bounded is certainly helping me to put the blinkers on, because everything else that is slightly related but not directly related to the goal, the end goal of this, I will now either try and put these as subtasks or just different tasks that are slightly connected, mentioned by this particular Jira task. I don't know. But I do get myself into a very bad habit of creating very generic tasks. And then when I come to it, I've got a load of subtasks that I think at the time of writing them are actually related, but they're not. So I suppose it's a case of trying to just iterate over your tasks and make sure that they are as specific as possible. I suppose this is the whole refinement process that I guess I need to do for myself, which, yeah. Anyway, if you can relate to this discipline issue when you're working on your own side projects, then please let me know. It'd be nice to hear stories from other people. And I would imagine that this is very similar to how junior developers feel when they start learning something and they realize that actually they're now down several rabbit holes deep, and they're now doing something that is not actually related to the initial thing that they wanted to learn. So for example, if you were wanting to learn JavaScript and then suddenly in your first week of ever learning JavaScript, you're learning React, it's because you've gone down a rabbit hole and you're now learning the opinions and the syntax sugar of React rather than JavaScript fundamentals that you initially wanted to do in the first place. But it's kind of slightly related because it's all JavaScript. Anyway, thank you for listening to my rant. Happy coding. Cheers.